All right, you ready?
I am. Yeah.
I'm Austin Lugo.
I'm Andrew Hart.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about When a Woman Ascends the Stairs.
Before we get into this week's film, next week we are going to be watching The Maltese Falcon for Noir-vember. I went through this huge noir phase 4 or 5 years ago. Well, it had to be before COVID because we were living in our very first apartment. And this was right after the Criterion Collection released their streaming service. And they had this collection that was 100, 150 films that were noir. And I just went on this mission to watch every single one of them. So for multiple months, all I watched was noir films. So I would say of all the genres, this is perhaps my most well-known genre. So I'm very excited to watch a noir film again. It's been a minute since I've seen a classic noir film, and there's never been a better time to watch a noir film. Is there any particular reason you picked this one, Andrew?
Not really. I mean, it's like the most popular one of the ones that I haven't seen on that list, on that collection. Um, yeah, might as well. I haven't seen it, so like you said, it's a classic.
Well, I'm very excited. And this week, too, we watched a film that I had seen before and you had never seen, which was When a Woman Ascends the Stairs. That's it, right? When a Woman Ascends the Stairs. I get the name confused a lot, but that is the right
That
name.
that is what it is.
Okay. I think it's the wind. That part always throws me
Mhm.
off. The rest of it I usually get, but the wind throws me off a lot of the time. Such a beautiful film, man. That not very opening shot, but one of those opening shots where anytime they're in the city, it just feels so claustrophobic and
They're in Ginza,
crowded.
yeah. It's cool.
And then those beautiful neon
It's dope.
lights when of that alley, I'm thinking with all those signs and she's
Yeah,
walking
that's
her back.
classic. That's some classic shit right there, right? Like when, yeah, like you get the shots of like the bar signs, right? And like the like you said, like the really kind of like kind of like cramped alleyway or whatever. Like that's very
Mhm.
kind of like I don't know why people really like that image a lot. And I feel like you see it a lot like in other movies and other
Yeah.
things. Um yeah.
And rewatching this film, I forgot just how emotionally intense this film is. There's a lot that I remember from this film,
Oh, you
especially
do.
when it
Okay.
comes to images, especially images. And a lot of the scenes I remember very well, especially on the rewatch. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this, I remember that. But one of the things I did forget is just how intense it is, how emotional the film is. I mean, here's a woman who's basically an old lady. She's almost 30 years old. And she has two
Mhm.
choices, which is the
Right. They lay that out
crux
pretty
of the
clearly,
film.
like about, into the movie they lay it out pretty clearly.
She can either start her own bar, quote unquote,
Right.
or she can get married. And that those are her only options because if she stays with what she does now, she will or she'll slowly descend into poverty because she's a geisha or a modern
I
version.
I don't think she's a geisha. She's like a hostess, right? Because like they have that geisha that comes in later, and they're like, oh, that geisha, blah 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 blah. I think there are differences. I think she's like more of like a hostess than a geisha, even though they do the same kinds of things, I guess. Um, although I guess hostesses don't necessarily like I don't know much about geishas or anything like that, but I feel like the movie does a good job at kind of laying out like kind of this culture of like bar hostesses or whatever in the
Hmm.
country where bar hostesses like I guess there's like this expectation that they kind of like hang out like with the male customers and they get paid to hang out with them
Yeah.
and but there's not necessarily an expectation but it could lead to like sex, right? Yeah. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's laid out like nicely.
Yeah, you're right. That's a very good point, which is they are professional girlfriends. I guess you could almost say professional friends. Their job is lonely men come into these bars
They're like
and
escorts, I guess is like the best, nicest
escorts.
word. Yeah.
without, and she makes the point that there's three types of
Right, yeah.
hostesses. There's
It's
the
great.
one who do well, they take a cab. There's the ones who do okay and they take the subway. And then there's the ones who do poorly, which go and sleep with
Yeah.
uh, their clients,
Their
which
clients, yeah.
it is suggested that it is not expected. However, there is this underlying,
Hmm. It's looked down upon.
yes,
It's unseemly.
but it's common too, and
Right.
men are willing to pay extra for that, and
Right. And
that's where
yeah,
she
well,
draws
that's
her
the
own line.
right. And that's like kind of like the whole crutch of the movie, right? It's kind of like it's basically a movie about like social expectations like after World War II, right?
Hmm.
Like kind of like what men are expected to do, what women are supposed to do, and why that dynamic is just ridiculous and like the expectations for women are much greater than the expectations like for men and what they're allowed to do, what they can do. Um, like all the men in the movie are terrible philanderers that just want to like they're all like married and they all like cheat on their wives and they're always like out drinking and stuff like that. And Kiko she is basically like she's basically developed this reputation for purity essentially, where
Hmm.
since the death of her husband, she's promised, and you don't learn this until much later in the movie, but essentially she has promised to never sleep with another man, even though she expresses early on in the movie that it can be like a little frustrating, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so for like for 5 years, she hasn't like slept with a man at all, whether for work or for, pleasure. Um, and so she kind of has developed this purity, which this is like a subject I've been thinking about kind of like in the Western world or even just like places like Japan or whatever. Like for some reason, there's like this very kind of like I think kind of gross obsession with like purity or whatever
Hmm.
or virginity, even though it's totally made up and doesn't really matter.
Emily watches these YouTube videos, which sometimes I like them, sometimes I don't. She watches a couple of YouTubers that are actually pretty good about, and they're like booktubers, so they read trashy novels and then talk about them. And
Yeah.
there's this whole genre in the romance category of literature, books that is specifically geared towards the 18-year-old
Hmm.
virgin. And
Yeah.
it's this very strange but very prolific and weirdly common idea about s- almost I'm thinking of the right word to describe just this obsession with virginity, purity, young too. And
Hmm.
I don't quite understand why this matters so much. Like what
It's like an impossible expectation
it
too.
is.
It's like a ridiculous expectation to like put on like anyone or anything. And
Anyone,
like
yeah.
I'm thinking too of like pop stars, maybe like Britney Spears is
Hmm.
another good example of like these like unrealistic like expectations like put on her at an early age of that kind of like purity, you know? It's just like it's a ridiculous expectation. And again, just like in the movie, the men are not held
No.
at all to the same standards.
No, because almost every man there is already married, or if they're not married,
Yeah.
they've been with
They're terrible.
plenty of women. And they're all the only perhaps redeemable character is the accountant. But even
He's terrible at the end though, because he's awful at the end. He's maybe the worst because he like is just like he comes out and basically just says like, "Oh, I had so much respect for you for not having like for being pure and like not having sex with anyone for 5 years." It's like, bro, like,
and he's
that's
only saying that because he wants to be with her. I mean, he doesn't
right,
actually
yeah,
care about her purity. He himself is in love with her and he feels hurt and ashamed, even though he never acts on, he just expects her to know and to just react without him just reading
yeah.
his mind without ever actually doing the things necessary. And he does help her through a lot of the film, but of course, the great irony is he
They're like
becomes
friends.
they're
Yeah, they're like friends, compatriots. Like
friends,
they
compatriots.
they're yeah, they're basically like co-managers, it seems like he's
Mm-hmm.
like the manager or whatever, but she also seems to be kind of like a co-manager, right? Like working with the girls and stuff like that they work with. Um, but he's so aggravating at the end, and the movie is quite aggravating like throughout because it's one of the movies where it's like a character is being beat down again and again and again, just like disappointment after disappointment, and you, the viewer, are also disappointed along the way because you really like her, Kiko. They call her Mama. She's a great character. She's played really, really good by Hideko Takimine. She's very pretty. And yeah, it's just like a movie where just like again, like she is just like disappointed frequently, and and you as the viewer also feel disappointed. And yeah, it's just that's pretty much the movie.
It's a movie where she starts at the bottom, and then by the end of
Yeah,
the
and
movie,
she
she's
just
somehow
ends.
lower.
She ends up like yeah, she just I would say she basically ends up where she was in the first place. Basically, I
Hmm.
guess like yeah, she basically has ruined the relationship with the manager, right? I forget his
Yeah,
name,
the
but
bank
yeah,
manager.
the
Oh, also
yeah,
the
she's
manager.
basically
Both
yeah,
the
right.
yeah.
All everybody like everybody
Everybody.
like his like yeah, all of her like frequent customers and the manager guy like have pretty much just sort of they've parted ways with her. But yeah, I feel like yeah, she just kind of like besides those details though, she basically ends up where she started at the beginning. And like you said, it's like you either get married or open a bar, and then by the end of the movie neither happens. And it's kind of like this. I like the ending just because like I know I'm kind of like skipping to the ending. There's plenty in the movie to talk about. It's like a little kind of everyday person drama. So
Hmm.
jumping around, I don't think is necessarily like,
No.
you know, but yeah, like I like the ending just because like it's it's like kind of hopeful, it's a very bittersweet kind of just sort of ending because she there's things along the way in the movie that you think could happen to her. Like she could get married, she could get a bar, or she could end up where she was, and that's basically what happened. Or, there is the real expectation throughout the movie where you're worried that she's going to kill herself just because like two other characters in the movie do. So at the end of the day, like it kind of has this hopeful resonance that like she sort of, has, she's putting aside all the terrible things that just happened to her in the movie, and she's moving forward and she's like going back to work. Even though she hates it and everything, and and is decided not to kill herself, even though again like that comes up again and again in the movie.
Yeah, the it's subverts this, which a lot of I think of Ozu's work too, subverts this notion of the Chekhov gun, as it were, where at the beginning of the film we're given this idea one of these two things have to happen. She has to either get married or she has to own a bar. And throughout the film, there's a point where you think, oh, she's getting married. She's going to be happy. She's giving up this life. She's moving on to a better place. Or at another point in the film, you're like, oh, she's going to get this bar and everything's going to work out. And every time
Yeah.
the thing she needs to do to no longer be part of the life that she is in, which she makes very clear that she does not like. She hates the job that she's in, but also her brother's kind of a no good, jobless uh, leech, and her mother
Yeah,
isn't really
and
much
her
better.
family needs money and she's the only one making it.
Her family needs money, but then all at the same time, they look down at her for doing what she does. Yet they're more than
Yeah,
willing to
it's
take
true.
that same money that she
Right.
makes from it. And she makes that very, I mean, there's that great moment because she has to go to the hospital because she basically passes out and
Mhm.
has this long, she needs to be on bed rest for a long time. And she has to live at home for a while. And neither her mother nor her brother have any source of income, have any way of working, mostly by choice. And they constantly criticize her for the job that she has, but
I,
they are more than willing to take the money that she makes. And most of her money
I
goes
don't
to them.
I don't remember the brother making any criticisms. He's kind of like he's a squirrely though,
Yeah.
right? Like he's a little bit more like pathetic, right? And the mom, like they have like that one scene where they have like a really big fight, right? Like which is a great scene in which they fight about like her profession and everything and like oh you're ashamed, you're ashamed of, us and all this stuff but then again like you said like the mom also seems a little ashamed of her and her work and everything and it's just kind of like
She cannot find even a single friend. I mean, not even just someone to love, but even just someone to really help her out because every time
mhm.
anyone even moves in that direction, it's clear that they have ulterior motives that they end up getting what they want most of the time, and she's stuck in this
Yeah.
same place. I mean, just as a hostess, her job is to entertain everyone else and to make everyone else feel happy. Even though she doesn't like to drink, she drinks all the time because
She drinks the whole movie.
the entire movie she's drinking. And she's like, I hate drinking, but that's part of the job. You have to drink, you have to be
Mhm.
happy, you have to put this facade
Yeah.
of who you are. You have to pretend to just always be in this great mood, even though she's not, even though most of these hostesses, I mean, two of the hostesses, as you point out, commit suicide. There's that
Yeah.
great scene where, because one of the hostesses has got her own, she bought her own bar.
It
She
was a great
didn't.
character.
And halfway or a little more than halfway through the film, you learn that she is in incredible debt because, as our main character points out, part of being hostess is you have to have and it's this vicious cycle of a luxurious lifestyle. You have to buy expensive clothes, you have to have a
Yeah.
nice apartment, you have to create the
Yeah, it's such a
illusion.
racket. Yeah, yeah, it's such a racket. It's like you have to do this job that barely pays well, but you have to like spend a bunch of money on things that you don't really need to make it seem as though you have a lot of money for some, it's like uh
And so, of course, her friend who owns this bar gets into an incredible amount of debt and she's terrified and she doesn't know what to
right.
do. And she's like, I'm going to kill myself. And obviously, our main
Yeah.
character freaks out and she's like, no, no, I'm just
No, no,
joking.
don't do that.
And then the very
No, no.
next scene,
Well, no, she didn't say she was joking. She said she was gonna kill herself. Remember, she said she was gonna kill herself and fake it so that the creditors could be fooled.
right,
Which I don't
right.
understand, like how, like how, like what was the, like I will like the Mikiko. She's kind of like, oh, okay, like she kind of like accepts this like idea as like a very like a good one, as if it's like, as if there's
It's
no
gonna
like,
work.
she doesn't ask like how the plan, how it would work or anything like that, and it's not explained at all because it's like, what, how would you do that? How would you like fake dying or fake killing yourself? Like, I don't understand how that would work. And then, yeah, like you said, she just does it anyway.
It does not turn out well, and that's a great moment when she learns that she's actually killed herself because they're sitting
Yeah.
around in their
Yeah, they're getting pampered.
they're getting pampered, right? They're getting their nails done, all that kind of stuff, and she realizes that her friend has taken these pills and murdered herself, and then she goes to the funeral.
Yeah, that's another aggravating part of the movie is the fucking funeral for
Oh
her.
my God. It is you just
Ugh.
you think finally just a moment of peace, just like let's for a moment, can we please just be with this character and feel the sadness? And then just
Yeah.
the evil leeches of
Yeah,
human
they're like,
society.
she owed us money. Like, yeah, the mom is like, she's like, yeah, the mom of the girl who kills herself, she's like, she's like, or yeah, her daughter just died. And at the funeral, like multiple people come to be like, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. By the way, she owed me money. I kind of need that like right away. Like, wow. That's crazy.
I mean, just the lengths that people will go to. And it is an incredibly accurate depiction of what it means to not only exist in a capitalist society, but to exist in a capitalist, especially in Japan, which
Yeah, post-war Japan.
post-war Japan, it becomes a right. It basically kind of
Yeah.
leaps up the capitalist uh,
Yeah, the
Rain.
global capitalist market. Yeah, it's like yeah, like a lot of money has a lot of, foreigners. They like repeatedly bring up like foreigners and stuff in the movie, right? They're like, "Oh, foreigners like this, foreigners like that." It's like,
Hmm.
there is I guess like this like expectation to be like them or have their stuff or things like
Well,
that.
also too, because before World War II, Japan was closed off to
Hmm.
the world for a
Right.
long time. So it's this very strange moment. And a lot of, I mean, you watch a lot of Japanese films of the 50s and 60s. A lot of them are trying, whether you're talking about Kurosawa or Ozu or whoever, they're all exploring the same idea because it's this very
Right.
strange moment in Japanese history where suddenly they're just inundated with people from all over the world, particularly Americans, and they have this need to participate in the global economy in the way that they never have before. And they're trying to match both the
Yeah.
traditions that have been in this country for thousands of years and then this modernity. And there's always this fight of the old and the new, the older
Hmm.
generation and the younger generation, butting heads always against each other, and it's never more extreme than at this moment. And this movie, like all of these Japanese films, really
Hmm.
explores what that means, what that's like to let go of these traditions, to simultaneously be seen as this pure virginal woman, but then also you are also expected to be
Yeah.
handsy with these men and be
Yeah, be
go
flirty,
home and
be
be
like, yeah.
flirty. And so
Yeah, yeah, and but the men have no expectation to really give anything else
no.
of note besides like yeah, they're not held to any of the same expectations. Like they're all married and yet they're not faithful at all, right? Like to their wives, even though that is not, I don't think you know, I think that's an expectation, but it falls by the wayside just because, these men they're rich, and
Yep.
they're powerful so they can get away with stuff like that, I suppose.
Yeah, at the end of the day, no matter where you are in the world, money speaks louder than anything else. And these men utilize their money to get anything that they want. I mean, they utilize this money
Yeah.
to control Kamiko, to make her do literally whatever they. I mean, that's not the reason that she ends up, which is a great moment of power because one of the men's like, if we have a agreed arrangement, I will give you the money to open your
Right,
bar.
they hold over like the bar, right? Because again, everybody knows that she wants to like have her own bar. And so yeah, a lot of these men, at least one, maybe multiple men, kind of like hold the bar over her head in
Oh yeah.
exchange for sex. Basically, like, like because again, she's established this like, like men are disgusting, right? And they want to like, dominate people. And so like the pure she's developed this purity expectation and they want to be like the first, to be there or whatever. So it's like more it's less to do with like love, of course, and it's more just about, being like, just, being a fucking, disgusting, domineering, guy,
And
right?
it's not even really about the sex. I think to these men, it's
Right.
more about the power that comes with the money, the
That's what I'm
power
saying. Yeah.
to control this person,
Yeah.
to hold this over this person.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess what's great in that moment is she refuses. She says, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not willing to sacrifice who I am as a person, my
Right.
beliefs, for better or worse, for this." And of course, one of the other characters is more than willing to do that, and that character
Right,
ends up
right. Yeah,
getting
that character.
the
That
thing.
character, yeah, she does end up
She gets the
probably, I'm
bar.
guessing,
Yeah.
yeah, she gets the bar from that older guy, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. Which it's like it's kind of funny because it's like I don't think the movie necessarily like makes that character seem like evil or anything like that. You know what I mean? I think it's just sort of saying like or like that she's like a floozy or anything
No.
like that. She's a bit ditzy, I guess, is like kind of the idea. She compared to Kiko, she's more ditzy, right? She's more
Yeah.
silly, I guess. Which you can read that however way you want. But I think too, though, I think the movie does a kind of like a decent job at kind of like pointing out that like like I don't think what she did wasn't necessarily like wrong or anything like that, right? Because she's also using these men to get what she wants. Um, which if men are going to use you to get what they want, then you might as well use them to get what you want, So I think the movie doesn't like necessarily paint that character in a negative light. Um, but you know, it's I think too, but you know, it's too bad that like it has to like come to that, right? It has to come to
Yeah.
the situation in which we people have to like use like sex and things like that to barter for like things.
And I think that's an incredible line that they toe really well here, which when characters like her who gets the bar, when they make these decisions, they're not portrayed in any light that is evil or bad
Not really.
or
They just
sluts or
are. Yeah.
floozies. It's it's merely an acceptance that this is really the only path to get the thing that they want. And as you point out, as you know, the men control the money, the women can control with sex. When that's the only thing that they
Yeah.
have to control with, they have to utilize that. And it's it's frustrating because you don't want that to be the case. You don't want them to have
Right.
to do this, but you you wish and hope for a world where this doesn't exist, but then you're also glad that some of these people are able to find success despite everything that comes against them. But
Mhm.
the question is, is it worth the cost? Is it worth the things that you have to give up? Is it worth having to give up how you see yourself or your
Well,
belief
yeah, I
in the
mean,
world?
but then again, you know, is Kiko, you could also say the same thing about Kiko. Is Kiko withholding 5 years of sleeping with anyone? Is that worth it? Did it really like pan out in the end well for her?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because at near the end of the movie, she decides to sleep with someone, and she doesn't sleep with
Right.
someone because of the money, although he pays her. He sleeps
Yeah,
with
he
someone
likes her.
because
She likes him.
she likes him. He's the big manager, and I mean, there's another great scene near the beginning of the movie where they're betting on who uh Kiko is gonna
Kiko,
go
yeah.
with,
Mhm.
and they point out like these three men who are kind of the main three
Oh,
men in
yeah.
the movie who
Hmm.
sort of are the different parts. There's the fat man who isn't that fat at all, but they call him
Well,
the
yeah,
fat man.
it's 1960, you know. Well, it's 19, you know what I mean? Like, in America, maybe yeah, like that was considered about right fat at the time, and now, in 2024, it's like, we got some pretty you know, things have gotten a little worse since then in terms of that. But yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the
He's more
fat
chubby.
man.
He's kind of like he looks normal. He just, looks like a normal guy.
Yeah. There's I mean, I
Just
know
the
there's a
older
bank
guy.
manager and then there's
Well,
the
yeah, I think it's the older guy who like wants to like give her the bar, like give her money for the bar,
that's
but
right.
like wants to have sex with her, like basically. Yeah, I think it's those three men basically.
Yep. And they're and what's
There's also the
interesting.
one guy, like kind of like the shitty guy, right? Like who at the beginning of the movie they ask her to call, right, to go to
Oh,
go to the bar, right,
yeah.
because like the business is down, and she's like, and right, like that's like kind of like the first like thing that happens in which you kind of like see Kiko like standing up for herself, like, no, I will
Mhm.
not
But
like
then she goes and
stoop to
does
this
it.
level. Yeah, well, she doesn't call him right at the beginning of the movie.
The no, the accountant does. But
Right, yeah.
she has to pretend like it was her, like she
Right. Yeah. And so yeah, that it's not yeah, I guess she didn't make the call, but yeah, you're right. Like, yeah. Um yeah, there's that character too, which she's not isn't like in the love she's not in the he's not in the, whole like thing, but like he's another kind of like key guy,
hmm
man there who kind of is like a particularly shitty or whatever to the woman,
Yeah,
more,
and
more or less.
I guess it's important to know because we haven't really talked about this, and I guess we're well into the podcast, but to explain how these bars work, which is basically they get wealthy
Yeah.
men to come to these places to hang out with women, and then the women
And they drink and yeah.
are paid on tips, and they buy stuff for them and that sort
Well,
of
it's
thing.
like it, but then they have to like collect the money like afterwards. Like they don't collect them at the bar. They have to
Yeah.
like go to them, which is kind of that part was kind of like very like that part was a little kind of like strange to me. It's like, wait, so you have to like go and call and seek out
It's
these
almost
men in
like
order to collect money, like a bill or
it's like
something?
a
Like,
subscription service. She
yeah,
decides
it's
that
like that part was really kind of like I don't know. I don't get that at all, but I don't know. But it's 1960 or whatever. I guess maybe credit cards haven't been invented. Like, maybe a guy will go to like a bar and they don't have cash, but they want to keep, spending money, right?
Yeah.
So they, I guess they ring up a bill and they don't have again, they don't have credit cards or debit cards at this point. So okay, we'll write it down and then we'll collect the money after. I'm guessing that's what it is.
Which
But it's funny.
the accountant in many scenes goes and tries to collect the money, and half the time they're
Yeah.
like, not even that they don't have the money, they're just like, I don't want to pay yet. Like
I don't feel like it.
I don't feel
I don't
like
feel like it. He's kind of like a pimp, basically. Like that's kind of like what he's doing, right? Like he's kind of a pimp. Like, where's my
yeah.
money? But he's much nicer.
I mean, it's not that far off. I guess he's like a middle
Yeah.
management pimp because he doesn't own the
No,
bar
he
either.
doesn't.
Because
No, no, he doesn't.
I think the very first time we actually meet Mama Kyo is when she's with the accountant and they're with the owner of the bar, and they're talking
Yeah.
about the bar's not
Hmm.
doing well, and you need to go call these people and bring all these people back and do all these different things. And so
Yeah.
he too, the accountant, is in this position where he he is managing and he has to collect these debts,
Hmm.
but he's also working under someone else. He's in this weird middle management position.
Yeah.
And he sort of tries to help her, but at the end of the day, it is for his own ulterior motives because he is in love with her, or in love with the idea of her, really. And it's clear that when she denies this love, or rather, when she sleeps with someone else,
Yeah.
she is seen as a floozy. He's released, right? Because he's idealized her. He's not actually in love with her. He's in love with this idea of purity and virginity.
He he's like seeing it coming too. He's like he doesn't really like again, like he doesn't say anything. So it's like what I'm assuming that he's known her for 5 years this whole time.
Mhm.
And so he's like built up that I guess this again, as he says in the movie, which is very annoying, like a respect, right? Like, yeah, you really respect her, bro. And it's like, wow, you're so respectful. And it's like he built up this respect, and then only when does she finally like let go of that 5 years of just not having sex, he like all of a sudden is like, oh, I love you, blah 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 blah. It's like, man, like what is wrong with you? Like that's ridiculous. It's just kind of like again, it's just like this expectation of like this man. I guess there's just no expectation, right, for like this for him to say these things or anything like that. It just seems like it just seems like a guy who is like, yeah, again, like I said, kind of like building up this like this respect for Kiko, um, but he's almost like kind of also looking forward to when it ends, right? He kind of like he sees it coming, um, which is also kind of weird too. Um, yeah, like yeah, again, that character is very frustrating, and it's a frustrating movie.
Yeah, I think of frustrating moments. One of the most heartbreaking moments is right after she has decided to give up her morals. She's decided to sleep with someone. She sleeps with the bank manager, and it's that next morning, and she's lying in bed, and he gets up, and it's very clear that to him this
Mhm.
meant absolutely nothing. He just it's as meaningless. Like once he's gotten the thing that he's wanted, he no longer like in that moment he's like, oh yeah, like all these great things are
He's
gonna
like,
happen.
I can't break up my family. Like I can't break up my family. It's just like,
Like
bro.
suddenly he has these morals.
And suddenly, yeah, suddenly he feels bad. It's like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah, well, and then yeah, he announces like, oh, then tomorrow I'm going to another city.
Yeah.
Bye. Like,
By
oh,
the
okay.
way,
That would have been nice to know before, we had this moment.
you know,
So yeah, that character is awful. All the men in the movie are awful. And the larger guy too, of course, it turns out he's like a philanderer, right? Like a horrible, like the most
I
evil
forgot
character
about
in the
that.
movie. Yeah, that's he like turns out like he is just like he's like the nicest character on the outset, right?
Hmm.
Like he seems like such a nice, like awesome guy. And then it's like, oh, it turns out like this is like he basically like lies to women and tells them that he's rich and stuff and that he's not married, and then he says I'll marry like it's just like wow, okay.
It's
Fuck.
it's it just I don't know how I forgot this moment, but I remember and then this is the moment where she thinks, "Oh, I'm gonna get married." Maybe it's not
Yeah.
the greatest guy in the world. It's very
I'm
clear
like,
that it's not
and you,
her.
the viewer, are kind of like, oh no, something's gonna happen. Yeah.
And of course, something's gonna happen. And
Yeah.
that great reveal when she goes out to, which is a great, it's a great location because it's the only time they ever leave the city, and it's just like this industrial
It's like
park,
on the outs. It's like on the yeah. It's like at the outset of this on yeah
and it opens on these two kids playing on this dirt field,
yeah.
and in the background is like this just disgusting, black steam and
Hmm.
soot rising from this
Yeah.
industrial complex, and there is the what we learn to be the wife of the fat man.
Yeah.
And she tells him the whole thing. She tells him, yeah, he
Yeah.
does this all the
He
time.
does it all the time.
This is just who he is.
Oh
It's like, oh my
no.
God. She just cannot catch a break. And just every man in her life has no interest except in how they can control her in whatever way that means. And whatever means they can use to control her, they will do. And they have no sense of remorse or regret at all in any of the things that they do. And she's forced, even though they are the ones making the terrible decisions, even though it is all of these men who do the terrible things,
Right.
it is her that has to pay the consequences for the
Again and
things
again and
that they
again.
do. Yeah.
Again and again and again. And it gets like worse and worse and worse. Like, it just like she loses the dream of the bar, she loses the dream of the marriage, and then she's like hit in the face, by him and all this stuff. And just like all this like it's just like again and again and again, she's just beaten down. Um which is why, it's like, the ending again, it's just kind of like just like the ultimate, bittersweet ending, right? Like kind of like she persists, and again, it's like the whole thing like of like being like a virgin or whatever for 5 years or whatever. It's just kind of like, that part to me is very interesting because it's like, was it worth it in the end? Like I guess that expectation of purity also comes with like the expectation of, being like this, like she said about like buying the nice clothes, buying the nice, having a nice apartment and stuff like that. It's kind of like all kind of comes together, right? In this thing of like, of kind of creating this character or this model, that like men, want to be with and hang out and talk with. Um, yeah.
Yeah, bittersweet is really the only way to describe the ending because obviously it's awful and you're miserable because she's at the exact same place that she started. She hates her job, she hates her life. No one's really the better for it. Everyone's left her or abandoned her. But I guess the one silver lining to all of this is that she has overcome the thing that has taken down everyone else that has
Yeah. Yeah,
she persists, she continues on,
she
and
didn't kill
there
herself.
she didn't kill
And you
herself.
don't want her to kill herself because like at this point you like her a lot and you don't
Hmm.
want to see her do that.
But yeah, it's complicated because
Yeah.
she did it. She's surviving, she's continuing on, but then you also have to ask yourself the question of, well, how long is that going to last? How long is she going to be able to continue to just do this? I mean, can she just continue to do this forever, or what happens when she gets even older? I mean, is she gonna see less and less men, have less and less money, and just slowly descend into
Right.
poverty? What's gonna happen to her mother? What's gonna happen to her brother? What's gonna happen to her brother's son who has polio? I think is
Yes,
what he has. Yeah,
because he has got the little crutches.
'cause he's got the crutches. And it's just it's the perfect way to end the film because it combines everything, all these just complicated emotions that are life,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
it doesn't give you that satisfactory.
Hmm.
I think even a suicide would somehow be more, in a certain sense, satisfactory because there would be an end. And you could say it's
Yeah.
over, it's done. Where it leaves you lingering. It leaves
Hmm.
you knowing that this is still going to continue on, that it's not, it's a cycle that that does not end with the end of this movie, that you do not get the pleasure of being able to go, well, that was sad, now it's over. Now I can have this cathartic moment where I'm crying because she died or she got the thing that she wanted. Instead, you're forced to be in this place where this is just going to continue on and on forever.
Yeah. I think too, it's like a movie that like in a very subtle way is very critical of Japanese society. Like at
Mhm.
this point in history, it's really quite critical, right? Because it's basically just saying like, you know, again, like I said, I've said before, it's placing all these expectations on these on women to do this, be like this, do that, but it's not doing the same for the men. And also, like we said, like money is such a has sort of like infected and sort of changed like the dynamics of how people interact with each other,
Mhm.
right? Like it's kind of like a movie all about kind of like transactional, people like to say like, transactional, like relationships or
Mhm.
interactions, right? Like everything is transactional, right? Like like a hostess interacting with a client at a bar. That's a very transactional relationship, right? Like it's all just kind of like based on like money. Like I would not be talking with you unless if you weren't paying kind of thing,
Mhm.
And it's like, well, I wouldn't, want to, you know, I'm paying you, but I have the control because I'm paying you for this conversation or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, it kind of, I think the movie is very critical of all these things. And I think it also ends up being a very like feminist movie, even though it's like written by a man, it's directed by a man, and all these things. Um, yeah, I just think it really comes out kind of like with like a very like astute kind of view, and you could like take this and you could apply it to other things. Obviously, there are things like the whole hostess bar thing. I feel like is very much like of its own thing. Like we don't really
Yeah.
have this stuff in America at all, really. I don't know if I mean maybe they still have it in Japan, maybe they don't. I really don't
I don't
know if
know.
this is a thing that continues. Um, maybe it's completely. Maybe they have unions now. That'd be nice to know.
Anyway.
Maybe they have like bar hostess unions so they can get paid much better. Um, yeah, and it's like it's so sad too. I hope so because like again, like the whole bar hostess thing seems like such a racket because like we said, they probably don't get paid that well in the first place. They have to give some of their money to the bar owner who doesn't do anything, and then they have to spend a bunch of their money on things that they don't need to make it seem as though they're rich. It's just like I love like kind of like the way that they kind of like discuss and like set up that political economy in the movie of it. I feel like I learned a lot outside of just, the movie's like, drama and story and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think of what the perhaps modern American version of this would be. And I guess the closest thing I could maybe think of is perhaps the maybe the modern day female influencer in which they have to spend all of their money taking
I
pictures of
guess.
these lavish locations, creating
Sure.
this illusion of wealth. And I guess I'm thinking more from like the end of the wealth end of where you
Hmm.
constantly have to spend money to be the certain way, maybe to a certain extent,
Yeah.
certain types of actors on the lower scale. Obviously, if you're a millionaire, I don't think this is much affecting you, but having to create this illusion of being powerful or wealthy or having to spend all of your money on this thing that isn't actually
Yeah.
true. And yeah, I mean, I guess we can hope that this isn't a world that still exists, but even if it doesn't exist in this specific thing, it very much still exists today. I mean, just capitalism in and of
Right.
itself. This is how capitalism works. It's this vicious. cannibalistic cycle in which the more money you make, the more money you have to spend because now that you make more money, you have to, everything becomes more expensive. You have to have nicer cars, you have to have a nicer house, you have to do X, Y, and Z, or different expectations that you were forced to have than you had before, and so on and so forth. And you just climb up that ladder and you're just forced in this constant state of, even if it's not literal poverty in the sense that you can't afford food or housing, you constantly need more money. You constantly have to keep working.
Right.
And even though you hate your job, just like she does, she
Yeah.
hates her job, but there's nothing else for her to do. She has no
It
other
yeah.
choice.
Yeah, it also doesn't help, like you said, she has no choice. Like it also doesn't help the fact that like, yeah, she's a woman, and of course women are viewed as second class, members of society, right? So they're not given nearly the same like amount of resources, or they're just not given the same amount of resources as men are. So again, like that scene in which she's like told like, okay, you have 30, so you'll either get a bar or get married, right? Because as you get older, the whole hostess thing, probably, doesn't necessarily work out as much as you get older or whatever. Which again is another kind of like, sexist kind of thing, uh but yeah, that's funny that those are the only two options for her. Like, it's like, she doesn't have to get like, I don't think anyone has to get married. Like I don't think anyone has to get married. It seems like she wanted a new bar, but it also kind of seems like she's like apprehensive about it.
Hmm.
Because they go visit that bar that's above like the sushi restaurant, and she's kind of like, it's kind of nice, but she's kind of like, I don't know. I think she could afford it, right? Though, and she kind of like backs away from it. I don't know. It just seems like she kind of like backs away from it with kind of like this trepidation of like, I don't know if this is actually really what I want,
Yeah.
you know? Um, like kind of just relegating your life to like these two choices is just kind of like, it is to me like, you know, uh, ridiculous, right? Like, in a perfect world, I think people should be able to do even more what they want. um to be able to do like even more things than just like this or that, you know because based on the fact that you're a woman and you're getting older and it's like, like I think people, who no matter how old they are or their gender or whatever, should be able to, be given, the equal amount of resources to do, whatever they'd like to do. But of course, in this particular instance, the movie of course goes out and points out that like, the choices are limited given these societal limitations that have been placed on her.
Yeah. And there is this interesting dichotomy, which they call them the office girls, which are
Yeah.
female secretaries and the like. And
That's very like post-war kind of like into the 1960s kind of thing of like, women are going into the workforce,
Mhm.
they're right, like they fought for, like women are now, secretaries or whatever, and then eventually, and then of course eventually like women will be like CEOs and stuff like that. um there's something kind of like false about that, you know what I mean? There's something kind of that rings a little false of that kind of like feminism or feminist arc, of
Mhm.
like, oh, women were secretaries and now we're CEOs. But a company, even whether or not a woman is a CEO or not, a company still relies on the exploitation of, workers, no matter their gender. So I don't see how that's all that progressive. You know what I mean?
Yes, capitalism is evil, no matter who's at the top, no matter the color of their skin or their gender or their sex. It's always going to be predatory and prey on the working class. So that does put us at just about an hour. Do you want to give some final thoughts on this one?
No, I mean, like I really liked it a lot. I mean, I thought it was a fantastic movie. It's got this nice, like, one thing about the movie I didn't talk about is that it's got this nice like regal kind of, swanky kind of feeling.
Mm.
The bars, the music, the way it's shot, the black and, it's just like, it's just a very kind of regal, kind of like nice sort of, it's not like a scuzzy movie, even though it's kind of like
No.
about like people paying for sex and stuff like that. Like it's not that, it's really not like that. Like you actually kind of like hanging out like in the places a little bit, with everybody, like in the bars and stuff. They're really quite nice, and like we said, like the shots of like the bar signs and stuff like that, and the alleyways are, it's just like, oh yeah, I like being there. I wish I was there right now. That'd be so cool. You know, like, so it kind of has this beautiful kind of like swankiness to it that I really, really like. And, like we said, the everything about it is good. The story is good. It has, great commentary on Japanese society at this point. It has good acting, of course, has good right. It's just like a good solid kind of Japanese drama that I'll give an 8 out of 10 too.
Yeah, I was very excited to watch this movie again, and it did live up to all my former expectations of this film. It is intense. It's strange because there's this juxtaposition of the visuals of this, which, as you point out, it doesn't look grimy. It looks very nice and swanky and regal, perhaps. And yet, the way Mama is treated is pretty awful and miserable. And it's portraying these two sides of the same world, which I think it's very easy to say, oh, here's some evil people doing evil things in the world and create the images that go along with that. I think that that's a very easy thing and perhaps a cheap thing to do as a filmmaker, but I think it's much harder to juxtapose the evilness or the cruelty that is going on with just the beauty of the images and a character who's just trying to do their best. They want to get out, but there's no way for them to get out. And their only two options to get out really aren't options at all. I mean, they just it becomes a new prison. Like her escape from prison only puts her in a different prison, whether that prison is marriage or that prison is owning a bar. It's not an actual escape. So even if she were to get the bar, even if she were to get married, she really wouldn't be in a better place. She really wouldn't be happier. She'd be stuck in the same way that she was before. And so when that ending finally comes and you have that bittersweet moment where, yes, she's made it, she's going to continue on, and that's great. And maybe she's a better person for that. But also, how long is that going to last? How long until she goes the same way so many of her friends have gone? Because she hates her job, she hates what she does, and there's not really any other option for her. So I love it. I'm a big fan. I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10.
Mhm.
All right, y'all. Thank you for listening. You can find everything I do at Austin Lugo.
You can follow me on Letterboxd at RetroAndrew, RETR0 Andrew.
And you can find this podcast wherever you hear podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at With Nothing to Say. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks.